I do is I record the lectures and then post them. So if you ever need to review something, you can just take a look at the recording. All right. So a quick overview of the course. Let's take a look at the syllabus here. Total of 17 weeks. One of the weeks is spring break. And so I divided it into two. The first half, the first 8 weeks, and the second half, the final 8 weeks here. When you're looking at the syllabus, you'll notice that there aren't any exams. The only exam that you see is on the last day. That's going to be the final exam. It's comprehensive, meaning it's going to cover all the material in the class. I do the exams two ways. One thing I do with exams is I just split it up, maybe 4 midterm exams and a final. But this semester I'm going to do it a little differently. I'm going to give an exam or quiz after we complete each chapter. And so the first chapter we're going to cover is chapter 24. We're only going to cover the first 3 sections of it. It's just learning about these new types of substances called complexes or coordination compounds. And so we'll learn a little bit about the structure and how to name them. And so after we finish that, then we'll have a quiz on that. And so typically the quiz or the exam will be a week after we complete the section. That gives you some time to complete the homework and prepare for the test. After chapter 24, we're going to jump back down to chapter 15. We cover that, and then the following week we'll have a test. The tests are going to be on Tuesdays or Thursdays. And so let's say if we finish chapter 15 on Tuesday, then the test will be the following Tuesday or possibly the following Thursday. Depends on the lab schedule. The tests for chapter 24, it's more like a quiz because it's only 3 sections. And so I'm going to come back to chapter 24 later. But the tests are going to average around 50 points each. This first chapter 24 one will be more like 30 points, something like that, or less. We'll see. Chapter 15 will be like a 50-point test. And a typical test will just be 2 pages long. On the first page there'll be some multiple choice. On the second page you'll have some calculations or some conceptual questions, definitions, that type of stuff. So the tests aren't that long. Typically you'll have an hour or so to do that. Okay, so we aren't going to use the whole lab period for the test. Normally I give those tests at the end of the lab. And so we'll do some lab work first and then the test. If you finish early, then you can leave early, that kind of thing. All right, any questions about the test? So we're going to have a test for each chapter. Plus a test for what we're covering today and tomorrow, chemical reactions. And I'm going to review the chemical reactions from Chem 1A today. But that test, I'm not going to give you one test for that. I'm going to break it up into multiple quizzes. So we'll have a bunch of short quizzes, like 10-minute quizzes. And then I'll tell you, okay, today we're going to do a double replacement type reaction. And so you prepare for that. You can take the quiz. And those are going to be spread through the whole semester. So it's a lot of stuff to review, and so I'm not going to hit you with a test next week on this. All right, that's it for the test. The problem is, what do I do at the end of the semester? Because I can't make you come back, after the final exam to test you on the material that we covered right before the final. And so what I'll do is I'm not going to have a test on chapter 25 and then the final. If you look at the last chapter we're covering this semester on page 2 of the syllabus, chapter 25 is going to be rolled into the final. But the final exam is not going to be like a chapter 25 test plus the final. It'll just be a final exam that covers all chapters with a slight bias towards, or maybe a bias towards chapter 25. A few extra questions from chapter 25. So it's not going to be like a 50-pointer test for that. Okay. The final exam is worth 200 points altogether. And so let's take a look at the course information sheet here and then see how the points are distributed. And so the exam/quizzes, all of those added up should be around 500 points. These numbers aren't set in stone. That is, it could change as we progress through the semester. But right now I have exams and quizzes worth 50% of your grade. This should be about 1,000 points total. Some of the chapters are kind of long, like chapter 17. If you look at chapter 17, I cover that over multiple lecture periods. And so since they're a little long, they contain more material, the exam is worth a little more. 65 points instead of 50. So that goes for 17, 14, 19, and 20. The homework, I'm going to collect homework, and it's worth 100 points total, so 10% of your grade. Pretty much 10 points per chapter. Each chapter's homework will be due on the day of the test. So chapter 24 is split up into 2 parts. And so part 1 of chapter 24 homework will be due next week. Say. Part 2 will be due later. Part 1 and part 2 combined will total up 10 points. And so the way the points are, let's say the homework assignment has 10 questions. If the homework assignment has 10 questions, then each question is worth 1 point. If it has 20 questions, then each question is worth a half a point. 40 questions, then a quarter point each. Right. And so how are the homeworks graded? The homework is going to be graded. I'm not going to check your answers on the homework. The way I'm going to grade it is to look and see if you attempted the problem, if you gave it a serious go, And if you did, that is, I see adequate work done, then I'll give you full credit for that. But ideally, you should have the correct answer on all the homework problems, because the complete solutions guide is available. I mean, you probably already have it. And so you have the answers to every single homework problem, I think, except for a few. And so worst case scenario is you could have just copied the homework from the solutions guide and gotten full credit for that. Now a lot of people say, don't copy it. They discourage students from opening the solutions guide. But let me tell you about my philosophy regarding homework. I think homework is critical. It's very important. And there's no way I think you can really learn chemistry without doing homework. It's just like I think there's no way you can learn to play, let's say, a musical instrument without playing it. And so when I see people who do zero homework go into the test having done nothing, then I think of somebody, they advertising a concert performance, they're going to play the piano in front of an audience without ever touching the piano. Is that going to happen? No, I just see them setting themselves up for failure, basically. But how do you do homework? Because some of my homework assignments are kind of long. I didn't realize this, but one of my students this morning said there's 60 questions in one of the chapters. 60 questions worth of homework. That's a lot of homework. And chemistry homework problems can go very slow. I mean, it could take you an hour to just do one single problem, right? And so if you're getting stumped, and this is just my philosophy, you could do your homework any way you see fit, but if you're getting stumped, I wouldn't spend much time thinking about it, you know. So I've talked to students who've told me that they spent 1 hour on that problem and still didn't get the answer. And I thought, boy, that's a bit of wasted time there. Because at this level, it's a little different at this level. At this level, you're still learning all the tools, for problem solving. You don't have those mastered. And so at this level, I think more of a shotgun approach is better. That is, if you see a lot of different ways to solve a problem, or if you see a lot of different problems being solved, I think is more beneficial than just studying one problem and seeing and understanding how that one problem was solved. And so the analogy that I use for this is like the forest. Let's say you're out to study a forest of trees, but you spend all your time studying one tree and then run out of time to study the remainder of the forest. Well, how much do you know? Well, you probably know that one tree pretty well, but you don't know anything else, right? How far the forest extends in either direction. And so what I think is this, give the homework a go, right? But if it starts taking too much time, then go ahead and then consult the solutions guide and see how the problem was solved. And at least copy that down. Copy down how the problem was solved. That way, you don't want to do this right before the test, because then it won't be very effective if you copy. Okay, well, it might be a little effective. You actually never give up. Continue to study until the last minute. That's another. But if you do this well before the test, then you have your homework to study from. You can see how the problems were solved. Problems were. This is to build up. And I've been studying stuff. I mean, this way of doing homework isn't unique to me. There are other people who do homework like this, and one of the people who did homework like this was a student I'd met when I was a student at UCLA. When I transferred to UCLA, they say, okay, orientation, they say, your GPA is going to drop 1 unit. So let's say you had a B average, you'll be a C average. You had a C average, you'll be a D average, that kind of thing. A average, B average. And so I went in there, I was determined not to let my GPA drop. I wanted, and so I devoted all my time to studying. I didn't do anything else except study, basically. But I found it a struggle initially. Here I was spending all my time studying, and the first class I took there, which is a thermodynamics class, I was doing poorly. And I couldn't figure out why, because I spent that much time and the results didn't show. And so another person in the class was doing exceptionally well. On the first test, got the high score, and I couldn't understand it. And so I thought, okay, maybe that person's just like a Linus Pauling chemical genius, right? And then this is it. This is the way that. No, actually, after talking to this person a while, I noticed, that they studied a lot differently than I studied. One of the things that this person did was they did every single problem in the book, 100 and something problems. How could you do that? It's impossible. I thought that was impossible. There's not enough time to do that. Well, I go to find out that the way this person does it is, at UCLA, they give the complete solutions manual. And so they read through the questions and then consult the solutions manual, that kind of thing. And then a lot of the instructors that I had up to that point said, never open the solutions manual. If you're opening the solutions manual, you're giving up, you're cutting out, you're forfeiting. But I realized maybe that's not quite right. For me, you have a problem, you have no idea how to solve it, then that means you don't have enough, of those neural connections or neurons. I also studied about this too, but maybe things aren't clicking in your brain. It's like, okay, I'm going to go fix a car, and all you bring is a screwdriver. Are you going to be able to fix the car? No, you need a whole bunch of tools, right? Well, the brain's like that. You need a whole bunch of tools to solve problems. And if all you're bringing is one screwdriver because you studied the screwdriver, I know the screwdriver. I can tell you it's 5 millimeters in diameter. I can tell you the circumference. I can tell you the pitch angle. But is that really helping you see the whole? Of course, no. And so this is the way to accumulate a whole bunch of tools rapidly. That way you do this rapidly, and then you give it time to click in your brain so that when it comes to taking the examination, hopefully you can, or you know how to use those tools. You're not a beginner. And so even if you copy the answers out of the solutions guide, I don't care. I think that's perfectly fine as long as you do it, well before the test so that you have time to let things gel, to let things click. And sometimes it does take time to let things click. I have this story I tell semester after semester. There was a final exam at UCLA, and the exams are, I have a little different philosophy about tests. Every exam I took at UCLA, except for 1 or 2 classes, was too long to finish. And so what you do is, the first thing you do when you get a test is scan it. See which questions you can answer easily and quickly, and do those first. And then leave the hardest ones for last. It wasn't always in order. And I don't remember, like in that thermo class I took, the high score was like 70%, because it was so hard and so long, right? But there was one problem, I was close to figuring out, but I couldn't get the answer, so I just left it. It was okay. Still did all right. And then after the final, I was at Ralph's shopping, and then at the cash register, it hit me. Oh, that's how you solve that problem, right? And so I just regret it just happened like 2 hours too late. Because if it was 2 hours earlier when I made that connection, I would have been able to get those additional points. But I think this is the same thing. If you see this initially as you're going through, don't worry about completely understanding it. Give it time to gel in your mind, and then review it. Review it before the exams, and then by the time the exam hits, hopefully it's made those connections. All right. So again, homework is due on the day of the exam, just for that particular chapter. There's one extra homework assignment, so the chemical reactions homework. I'll talk about that. It's a handout, which HO stands for. The lab altogether is worth 20% of your grade. It's 200 points. It's going to be 15 points per experiment, except for qual, synthesis, titration, and rate law. Qualitative is worth a lot more, 35 points, because it's a very long lab. A lot of you have done qualitative analysis in Chem 4. It's the same thing, except much more involved, many more steps. And so I think we do qual over 5 or 6 lab periods. And your grade's going to be based on your unknown analysis. The next 3 labs, synthesis, titration, and rate law, those are just your standard labs, except I want you to do formal lab write-ups for these 3. A formal lab write-up is like a scientific paper format where you have something called an abstract, an introduction, etc. We'll talk more about that if you're not familiar later. But at UCLA, they require all the general chem labs to be formal lab write-ups. Here we don't. So I figure 3 is plenty enough, probably more than enough to get familiar with it. The more you do, the easier they become to write. In Chem 1A, I had them write 1 or 2, depends on which semester, or 3. Your Letter grade is going to be base 88%. This number is not going to change. It's fixed. 88% and above will be an A. 78 is the cutoff for a B, and 65 for a C. Since lab and lecture are combined, lab and lecture are separate classes at UCLA, but here they're combined, so we have a policy. If you fail lab, you fail the class. So even if you're doing great in lecture, A's on everything, but you don't show up for lab, which has happened before. I had one student who was doing great in lecture, showed up for every test, but never came for lab. I had to fail them because of this policy. All right, academic honesty. Short note about that. Special needs. If there are any special needs, contact the Special Resources Center or shoot me a note. Find this. Any changes? You know, there could be changes, like I said. I'll announce in class typically, or on something called piazza.com. Piazza.com is just the class bulletin board. You can post things, and you can ask questions too. This is a discussion forum. All right, flip the page over to page 1. Let's take a look. You can see the course description. Let me give you a quick rundown on the course. If you look at the syllabus, we cover coordination compounds initially just to learn about these new types of substances you haven't studied in Chem 1A and learn how to name them. But chapter 15, 16, 17, and 18 are all grouped together. They deal with stoichiometry, essentially, 15 through 18. And so you're all familiar with stoichiometry, limiting reagent, excess reagent, right? Theoretical yield, percent yield. But what happens if you have a reaction that doesn't go to completion? Let's say all the reactions you've done for stoichiometry have been 100%. You assume that all the reactants react to form products. All the limiting reactants react to form products, right? But what if you have a reaction that only reacts 20%, or 10%? And what if that percentage varies depending on your starting concentrations or pressures? And so it's not a fixed percentage each time. Well, that's Chem 1B stoichiometry. And so in Chem 1B stoichiometry, which is chapters 15 through 18, we're going to learn how to deal with those kinds of reactions. Those kinds of reactions are called equilibrium reactions, where we have forward and reverse reaction taking place. Therefore, it doesn't go 100% forward, it doesn't go 100% reverse. We have both. After chapter 18, we drop out to chapter 14. Chapter 14 deals with something called kinetics. So to understand chemical reactions, you also need to know something about kinetics. That is, how fast the reactions take place. What factors influence the speed of the reaction. And then from kinetics, chapter 14, we'll jump to chapter 19. I like to keep kinetics and thermodynamics together. The reason I like to keep kinetics and thermodynamics together is there are a lot of interrelated things. These are two totally different topics, though. Kinetics deals with the speed. You know what thermodynamics deals with? Like heat, calories. In other words, thermodynamics deals with the energy, the energetics of the reaction, which I call stability or reactivity or driving force. All right, after chapter 19, we go to chapter 20, electrochemistry. Chapter 24, we'll finish that. And then on to chapter 25, nuclear chemistry. So that's the breakdown of the course. Required materials, we need the second half of Petrucci. The lab manual for this, Chem 1B, is a bit more expensive. It's the Catalyst custom published lab manual. You'll see it. I think it's like $25. Your lab notebook depends. In some Chem 1B classes, they require one of those carbon copy duplicate lab notebooks, the professional grade ones. I'm not going to require a professional grade lab notebook. I'm just going to require a simple composition book. It would be nice if you could find a composition book that has graph paper, ruled paper, quad ruled. But if not, simple college ruled is fine too. And the lab notebooks, I decided to switch this because everything's getting so expensive. So I thought this will be a lot cheaper. Composition books, I think at Big Lots are like 79 cents each. At the 99-cent store, they're like $1. They're pretty cheap at our bookstore. Our bookstore has a little bit bigger version of the they call a lab notebook. It's in the engineering section. It's like $3. A little bit bigger page makes it nicer. Safety goggles from Chem 1A are fine. A scientific calculator. I have a recommendation for the scientific calculator. You should get the SAT compatible calculator that can solve quadratic equations. And so it's not a full programmable calculator. Full programmable calculators aren't allowed. You need a non-programmable calculator, but even with a non-programmable calculator, you can get ones with equation solvers on them. And so it's nice to have an equation solver to solve quadratics. Otherwise, it's a headache solving the quadratic equation over and over. And so you'll have to do a bit of research. The particular calculator that I have is, I can't remember if it's a Casio or Sharp or something, but the model number is an FX115ES. So FX115ES. Get something comparable to that or that one. I got mine at Target. Actually, I'm on my fourth one right now, but I bought it at CVS, Target, wherever. It's available at most places. They'll save you a lot of time doing homework. So make sure you get something that can solve quadratics. You can also get a web-based quadratic solver. If you're doing homework, you can just punch it out. Open a quadratic equation solver. A Sharpie, you'll need too for labeling. Recommended materials, a lab coat, and disposable gloves, nitrile or latex. This is not recommended at UCLA. This is now required at UCLA, so everybody must wear a lab coat because of the recent accident they had there. All right, any questions on this handout?
Concerning the textbook, does it have to be the hardcover, or can I just get it on the tablet?
It doesn't. You don't need the hardcover. You could get the e-book, or you could get the soft cover. They have it broken up into two parts in a bookstore, part 1 and part 2.
And then concerning the lab apron and disposable gloves, can I use one of those lockers that to shove my thing in?
Not these particularly, because these are used for all the sections in here, but maybe in the back. Okay. I can find some place secure. You could use the store. Lab aprons, the last not apron. I haven't bought an apron in a long time. The last lab coat, actually, my first lab coat I bought was $100 and something, and the last lab coat I bought was $16, and so I just got it off Amazon. It's good enough. I wasn't going to buy another $100 lab coat. So take a look. Gloves, if you're a member of Costco or Sam's Club, they have gloves that are pretty cheap. You can buy them in a box. All right, any questions about the syllabus? Exams? Homework? Nothing? We're going to take a break, and then we'll